Right, here we are, Central Front series. The story so far, it's kind of weird because nothing's happened, you know. I mean, basically. Right now, we've got Soviet incursions and Warsaw Pact allies pushing in a little bit everywhere. We've done one impulse of the first game turn so far. We've done the Soviet initial advance onto the board. What we found is that the armored cav screening forces that are along the border are sufficient to pretty much stop a Soviet division. I mean, maybe not each. Certainly, Allied Pact divisions have a lot of trouble pushing through a company of armored cav. Soviet first line division, they can probably handle one or two of these companies and push it back a significant amount of distance. Might kill some. We've got the total units that are gone. Most of all these Soviet units that are gone are because I did a paradrops. I wasn't going to do these, but I did them on the two maps that allow for a Soviet paratrooper division. It's probably the best move for the Soviets to do. But I could have actually neutralized some of the NATO helicopters, which are incredibly powerful, on defense. I mean, they're not going to do much on attack. Nothing does much on attack. And that's the whole thing. You need such high odds in this game to be able to get an advantageous combat result. Advantageous being you take less damage than your opponent. That what it really means is regiment after regiment goes striking into these companies and, you know, maybe not doing too well. Anyway. And we're talking about the odds, right? The break-even points for the odds are like 5 to 1. You know, in fairly clear terrain. In cities it's cities it's 7 to 1. I think the odds on clear terrain are supposed to be 3 to 1, right? 3 to 1 is here in clear terrain. That's kind of the break-even point. You got to go above that for it to be worthwhile. Now, if you're doing mobile combat, you have to do a lot higher because the defender ignores the first loss in mobile combat. I've used up all my Soviet air power for the first turn and much of my electronic warfare. Of course, NATO doesn't have air power on the first turns of the game. I've blanketed attacks. Most of that air power was used to deliver chemical weaponry because I'm not allowed to use artillery on that first impulse. The way the game handles the Soviet doctrine, it means that the artillery is not on the board when your lead units start hitting, and therefore it can't fire and it can't do shit. You could conceivably lead off your attacks by bringing in non-divisional artillery units to drop chemical warfare. Similarly to the idea of using the paratroopers to try to knock out the helicopters. It's just stuff that doesn't really come to mind as being all that valuable. Like my intention with the paratrop was to use it to capture territory in order to ease my advances and to make threats available, you know, in terms of like, what is it, my go term, ATJ, to be able to provide additional threats in place that would make it more difficult for the NATO to react. Instead, though, I think the most valuable thing would be to land and neutralize the couple of attack helicopters that are within range of supporting the armored cav in the initial battle plans. I'm very discouraged so far and don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to cope with this, but I haven't started reading any other rules, so I don't know, unless I've got something really kind of familiar to me to throw up. Empires in Arms. Unless I've got something I'm really comfortable with, or you know, and there's smaller things that I could do. It's gonna be pretty hard. It's gonna take me a while, and the way I'm doing raid and whatnot, it's just I don't have a lot of time, and it's easy to come and push some pieces here, I guess, and then I'm fatigued and don't want to do anything else having to do with gaming. To pull some forces onto the map, it's weird, North German plain stuff is coming in off this side, which kind of makes sense, but it's also coming in with very low movement point allowances, way below what you'd expect, but maybe that's the new system, whatever. I'm going with them because I don't have anywhere else to base my movement points off of. And then we get to, hey, I probably want to disengage wherever possible. Now, I've gotten these reinforcements done already. A few West German units, basically. But in order to disengage, what I need to do, NATO paralysis, again, it's not covered here. What I'm going to do is everything north of this line that's not West German is going to be paralyzed. And that just means it doesn't have the right to move in this first turn. But in order to exit an enemy-controlled hex, if I want to move everything, I have to roll a die, and I need a 3 or less to conduct the move. So if we take a look at this, I probably want to pull back with that. So we'll try. It's going to cost me 6 movement points to move him. I don't get a 3 or less. He's just stuck there. And we're going to do that, you know, across the board, all the way over, trying to pull back. And as we start pulling back and finding, you know, where we can retreat to, then we'll pull the reserves forward to help cover the line in other locations, but it doesn't make any sense. Now, there's things like this that I really can't do shit with, right? It can't go zone to zone, so it's just stuck there behind enemy lines without any capability to do anything. And I don't have the kind of force to launch any kind of attacks on this turn. I can nuke. Make a quick check. There are no more West German reinforcements coming in from here. That's important because I'm planning on trying to fall back there. That strikes me that's not at all clear is what kind of defensive line works in this game. Probably the every other hex stacked as strongly as you can. Some of these units are chewed up pretty badly and really can't do a hell of a lot anyhow. But there's no real advantage to having a solid line because blowing a hole through that, through a single solid line allows you to advance through it completely. Something like a double line might make sense. It might prevent, you know, some kind of a rear attack, you know, advances towards your rear. Right now there just aren't a lot of troops available, so I'm doing what I can to get things up there as fast as possible, but it's not, it probably has, I don't know why that's damaged in the way it is. That doesn't make sense. Oh, this was a unit that just came on. That's why. Okay. But yeah, I'm just trying to figure out a way to deploy my forces. Now, it's going to get harder. On this phase, it's pretty easy. If a unit's on its black face side, I don't have to do anything. Like, I know I can still activate it. But as soon as we get to the next impulse, it becomes a lot harder in the sense of, yeah, did I move this unit or not? I'm suspecting that most units aren't going to want to move in their second impulse, at least if they're in anything like a proper defensive location. So I'll have very few units per map that I actually want to move after the first impulse. That may be different for the Soviets, though, and if the Soviets, or Warsaw Pact in general, and if they, make a breakthrough or something, I've got to react to that. So at least locally, I'm going to have to be able to keep track of what the hell I'm doing. A little problematic is I'm going in both directions, right? These covering forces are trying to fall back. They're not really what I want to defend with, though. I want to have my bigger units on the line defending this river line and whatnot. And it's kind of hard to tell, hey, where do I go? So I've got some of the armored cav beginning to move its way back, and then I'm like, yeah, but maybe I'll be moving stuff forward. So I'm going to start looking at the West German units and see what needs to move and what doesn't. And I guess I've moved most of what's here. I've got a couple of airdrop units that I could bring into play if I really feel like I need some defensive depth. One thing that's helping me, the Elbe is really thick over here, and well, in a couple of hexes. And I think that's basically uncrossable as far as I can tell. May not be the intention. I don't know what the original game was, what the original thing was. But basically, anywhere where I'm crossing a river, I'm using normal river crossing. So like, I can go from this hex to that hex, but I can't go from here to there. It's just how I'm doing it. This map was not part of the rules that I'm using. So. Trying to recover what we can, trying to build a line here along the river. I feel like I've got it largely defended. There's a weak spot right in here that I'm a little worried about, but there's weak spots along here too that, I just don't know that I can stop the Soviets. These guys couldn't, of course, pull back. We did checks on them. Over here, this guy couldn't get out of there. We're trying to bring in what we can. I do have a few units over here that I don't know which map they're going to end up on. So I've put the tweezers because I've moved enough units on one map that I don't really feel like pushing onto the next. Basically, before I move those, I want to move a bunch of stuff on the Bayor map. The Bayor map is going to be restricting. Let's see, the Brits over here are allowed to move, but if they're behind the Weser, they're not allowed to move, and that is a fair amount of the forces, but yeah, I just don't know, what we're going to end up with, whether these West German units are going to want to move over here. It looks to me like this is poorly defended right now, and I don't have a lot that's able to throw itself in my way. I do get a couple of units here, but I think that these are going to be diverted onto the Bayor map rather than using them over here on the North German plain, just because I've got a fair amount of defense here. Plus, I got a lot of reinforcements in terms of the Dutch coming in here, and I got a lot of reinforcements in terms of the French coming in over here. All my reinforcements were wiped out on 5th Corps and Hofgap, and all my Belgians are wiped out on the Bayor. The Brits are going to still keep coming. But there really isn't a lot up there to defend, and I want to, stymie the Soviet advance as much as possible. And right now, it doesn't look that likely in terms of sheer number of troops. But that armored cav is so powerful, man. I don't know. I got no idea. Oh, I know I complained about the reinforcements occurring from what? From the newer editions of the game, and in here? Yeah, in here in particular. Bayor, which was done at about the same time as that set, uses the old style, which is hey look, X game turn, this shows up, X game turn, that shows up. It's still not trivial to find because you're looking for GT1 in this little column, like there could be easier ways to cope with it, but at least I have the unit designation, etc. I can hunt them down and figure out which command is coming in and then what it needs to do. So in this case, I'll be coming in at 3909, which I'm guessing is that highway over there in the corner. I don't know what else I have, but yeah. I'm gonna run one more map. Might again keep a few units undetermined because they're adjacent to another map and I'm not sure which side they want to go, but we'll do what we can. And the Bayeux map is so sparsely defended at this point, it's hard to find a way to put my units where I want them to be. I haven't moved this guy one, two. A little bit of potential defense there, trying to create, artillery zones and whatnot that I can utilize. There's a lot of that armored cav though that's in the way, and I'm hoping that can kind of hold off. Places like here, hey, I figure it's worth defending this line and trying to make. I've got some decent sized units there. I think it's worth trying to hold it. Of course, here I'm only in the woods instead of a city. But pulling out would be hard and would cost me a friction point no matter what. I get to recover this friction point if I can survive there, so I'm letting him have his set piece battle there with my heavier unit. Although I'm weakened, that's only a 2 strength point for if it's a mobile attack. Trying to see what else. I feel like, I've got to also worry about the edges of the map, right? Like here, there's a danger that the Soviets come cutting through here. It's kind of hard to picture because the map is jig-jagged back and forth and everything in terms of it's very easy to think, okay, I'll move this one map, then I'll get to the next one. But the interaction between them is... There's a certain cognitive dissonance that just occurs due to things. So, I've got things like this armored cav here. I don't remember, I think it came from this map. It's pulled back to help defend these guys over on this map, Okay. There's a lot of forces that are not in happy shape. And I got a couple of artillery back there that I can move that I haven't done, and I've got, oh no, those are Brits. Those can't do shit. Yeah, okay. It's hard to tell the Brits and the Germans apart because they're similar color. So this is one of the German units, this is a British unit. Whereas with the new version, wow, they're really different. Unlike the French and the Dutch, who look absolutely the same to me, and I have no way of discerning those. All right, we've started to move. We use the tweezers to indicate where we're at as we work our way across. And we may end up, working in from this direction as well and just holding off here and doing from the edges, because that can be easier. You've got your secure flank at the edge of the map or whatever, and you can say, okay, I can operate there. Here it might actually make sense. This river's pretty potent. It'd be hard to cross. There might be some operations up here. We're talking Denmark and whatnot up there. I've seen it in NATO where that's happened. Here it's even more absolute because we've got Austria off this side of the map, who's technically neutral now. The Soviets can, Warsaw Pact can violate Austria. It doesn't give you any Austrian troops, but it does allow NATO to then enter Austria. All right. It's time for me to go raid. It is Monday, and again, I'm counting on, I don't know, this weird sort of situation where there's this guy who maybe is going to help me get the log off my roof. There's a piece of it hanging down there. It's hard to tell because there's tree behind it. But anyway, I've done, it fucks up my whole time period because I don't know when he's going to show up, if he's going to show up. Last week, it was equally vague, sometime next week, and then it was okay, I was hoping to get there on Wednesday, and then he didn't make it on Wednesday, and now he asked hey, what's a good day? And I'm like, well, early in the week's good. I should have just said Monday or whatever, but you know, he's doing me a favor, so I don't want to put any pressure or anything. But on the other hand, I need to get food, and it's supposed to rain for the rest of the week. And worst of all, my cart is probably broken. I'm afraid to look at it, which means I will have to rely on a backpack. All right, so I've moved most of my units, but not all of them, over here on the Donau front. And I'm not going to come back. I just noticed a couple of units that I didn't move. It's kind of hard to see which units are flipped and which aren't in a lot of ways. Some of it is because of the homemade counters. Like this guy didn't move, but I don't want to move him. He's where he wants to be. But I've fallen back in a lot of cases. Some reinforcements are coming on. There's some units that are incapable of moving. I don't know what's up with these guys, but I don't think they're capable of moving. So, like, they look beat up. So they're probably, if anything can move, it's going to try to set up a defensive line cutting out this way. Because obviously I need to try to hold Nuremberg and stuff like that. The Hofgap map looks ugly for NATO right now. The Donau front doesn't look anywhere near as bad, but I have to give ground. I just don't have many troops. What I do have as potential reinforcements is all these paratroopers, airborne units actually, some are paratroopers, that I can bring into play. And if there's anywhere that I absolutely need to throw some more reinforcements in, I will be using them. Actually, I will not, because I don't have air superiority. So, and more importantly, the enemy has air superiority. So I have no chance of bringing the air troops, the paratroopers in. But it's a big deal because, like, this is the time when I'd want to be able to deploy them quickly. As it stands, they have no way of getting on the map. They're based in air bases in France. Some of them are in Germany, though. But yeah, this is most of Donau front. I'm moving my way in, trying to connect the two, because I think the 5th Corps map is going to be the one where I want to understand better, you know, from the edges inward. My movement on the Hofgap map, these little diamonds, boy, they're kind of a hard thing to see, right? They're almost equivalent to these roads here. I kind of wish there was just a huge road network everywhere instead, because, you know, yeah, you can trace these lines and kind of see them, but it's so much easier to see actual road lines. I actually think it's kind of funny that they maintained that weird design concept between the two maps. But I'll say there's something very odd about the newer maps. You'll see there's these diamonds on, well, not there, but places like here, where they actually don't have an effect, at least under the old rules. Maybe they have an effect under the new rules, but plane to plane is a 1 movement point cost under the original rules. Flat has an ops point of 1. Roads have a half. I've been spending them for 1. Access points have a 1. Maybe they've reduced the cost to be the equivalent to roads, in which case it's all the worse. I've been doing roads as 1. I don't know why, but there's nothing I can do to go back from it. I just assumed roads are 1, autobahns are half, but they're not. They're equivalent. They're the two that are almost equivalent. But where they're not equivalent is when you're coming on the map, you pay 1 extra movement point per unit entering on the roads. It's as if the roads are slower when you're entering the map. And there's some other special weird cases where they're like a little bit more expensive than the Autobahn, and I'm just like, my mind didn't bother looking at this relatively hefty in terms of text chart. It's kind of difficult to me. I'm used to not a hell of a lot of information on a single sort of movement point chart, and this has so much that I end up eluding certain information. There's also a little weirdness here where these maps line up. The road here is lined up. Road here is kind of lined up. Here kind of lined up here. I've got. This is a little off. You know, Okay, but I've got a big gap here, which I don't think I can fix in any sort of way. I'm just kind of connecting those. It doesn't really make much difference, but if I need to, I say that they're the same, but there's something fucked up in terms of the conjunction. The conjunctions on the original maps are fine, and I think they're okay over here. I got these little gray things that kind of confuses the issue, but something got fucked up with the Donau front connecting to the Hoff Gap. The screw up isn't too surprising given that there was about a decade between the games in terms of when they came out, that the maps wouldn't perfectly align. And just, you know, it's just something to point out and say, something may be a little fucked up. They did the same scale and everything. And then there's other stuff. Well, no, this one too. Looks like, it just looks like, you know, you could say, well, you're off everywhere. Yeah, a little bit here. I don't want to try to fix it. It's too much of a pain in the ass when I do. But, you know, this little bit is not the equivalent to this or this, right? Some of them are very badly hooked, and others are, yeah, a little off, but I can see what likely was there, and that's probably me misaligning more than anything else. The NATO paralysis zone, for the most part, there's not a hell of a lot I can do on the Hoff Gap map. I've tried to pull back with everything I can. I sent some reinforcements in here rather than try to pull the artillery out. I figure the Soviets will attack, but it's what it is what it is, right? You know, there's only so much I can do. I got a huge gap right up here heading straight up the center, but there's nothing that can really exploit it. This road might be of some value or whatever, but conceivably this column could make a lot of distance. There's nothing I can do. These forces could continue to fall back, take more hits or whatever. Actually, these guys are the guys from the major training area. Some of them came from Nuremberg, some of them came from somewhere off on the North German plain map, which is kind of fortuitous. They're able to cover one of the potential gaps, because otherwise this column could just charge straight up through there. And remember, space is what the Warsaw Pact wants. Anyway, that gets me down to one remaining map for this poll. And I think that's pretty much the end of the line with the 5th Corps map. Let's work our way through, take a look at what we've got. You know, scattered defenses in certain areas, but really the line starts here, cuts through along the river. Great. Then we've got a gap here, but I don't think it's one that the Warsaw Pact is able to exploit. They don't have a force heading in this direction. So I think that's safe for now, getting me to this area, which then kind of links to here. Again, a gap across that river, that's more problematic. And this is really nothing. So we've got really a big gap here. Now there's a swamp in the way, a river in the way, all kind of stuff, and there's not a big, that Soviet unit's not really in a position to take advantage of it. It may cut through though. We got to be careful. Over here, West Germans have some defensive units over here. I felt like this guy had to stay there, so why waste friction points on him? You know, sure, somebody else might come up, but there's damaged units that need to recover. That brings us to here. Now, this gets weird. We got another gap coming here, but there's a second line of defense in place, sort of, and I'm hoping to be able to fall back. This is just really armored cav, although that artillery there. These guys, I didn't even try to get them out of there. This guy's beat up. He doesn't really want to leave, I guess. He's not that beat up. Yeah, he's worth taking a chance for. Let's just, let's try to fix some things where we got problems that we see. Because that can shoot right up. That gets to move. So that's, oh no, 6, 7 to here. 8, 9, 10, 11. And I could either, I can't stack it with that, 12, or do I stay at the town? I think the town's safe enough. I just don't feel like there's a lot of force heading this way. This one, there's not really that much of an advantage to me withdrawing there, except getting beyond the river line, and I can retreat beyond the river line. Will I be subverted? quite possibly. All right, we'll try him. I don't like doing it, but he gets out of there, so that's 7, 8, 8.5. Do I want to be here? Yeah, I think that protects me a little bit better. Keep looking. This guy probably wants to get moving. This guy can't. This is Brits. Why am I doing this now? How did I miss all this? I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's get him back to there. It's not optimal, but it does give me a little bit more filler back here in case things get there. I can't get out of here. Here I chose not to. Okay, so then we got the line going over the river. We do have a gap there. There's nothing I can do about that I can see. Without, burning units that are already somewhat exhausted. That have taken damage or whatever to try to fill that gap. I'm just hoping for the best. Again, there doesn't seem to be there's one Soviet division in this area. It can cut this way, it can cut that way. Otherwise I get a chance to move again. And remember, movement points are more expensive. In particular, this is where the roads get more expensive when you're using additional movement on them, on roads. This guy had no reason to get out of there. He can fall back or die or whatever. It doesn't really help me to pull away from just one enemy stack, is kind of the feeling, unless I have, like this is a nice defensive location. If this was a healthy guy, I would pull him back, but I don't think he's very healthy. He is not. He's like 2 away from dying. And then we cut to here, and then again we jump off. Now, there are no Soviet units coming in through here until next turn. So I'm not really worried again about any kind of attack coming from this direction. It could have happened with very low movement points or something. I think actually these guys, anybody coming in from here would have had a delay until next turn anyway. And that brings me then up to a little jag up here where I've got the line hitting here and continuing on. We've pulled back a little bit, but not everywhere. Here we failed, for example. We keep going, and then, we've got this line continuing in pretty good shape. This is secondary stuff. We go down here, we got the armored cav again, protecting here. Then we drop down to the main, and things don't look so good there. My hope is the secondary line back here, but I've given up half the map at that point, okay? I don't know what the victory conditions are. I'm not that focused on them. I'm focused on more broad concerns. We'll see how the victory conditions kind of evaluate as we're going. There's not much I can do. I have to put these defenses in line. I have to hope for the best, But this is not solid. There's a big division ready to cross that river and subvert these positions. Could I have gotten away? Yeah, but these are damaged units already. So artillery is not. It would have been of some value maybe to pull the artillery out so that I could use it in more places, but it's actually, I think, providing a kind of nice thing here. I'm not expecting all of these to get pocketed. This, on the other hand, is just out there. This is just out there. It's damaged goods. We've cleared the way, though. We've just gotten out of the way everywhere. So then we have a huge gap going up to the Regnitz here. And then like a light defense over there. There's real defects in the defense here, especially on this Hofgap map. It's too sparse. We don't have a lot of troops there right now. And then we cut down and we get to what looks like a pretty decent defensive positioning just in terms of the troops that are present and everything. We've got some actual reasonable stuff. The armored cav, as much as possible, I'm pulling it back. I don't expect anything to come up this way, but if I leave the door open, something will come up that way. So I've got to leave something kind of to cover there, but I'm expecting the attacks to be happening where the bulk of the enemy force is. So that's where we are. And now we go to the second Soviet impulse. Now this gets tricky. I've already mentioned this. All the counters that can move are already flipped over on their white side. I've got to be real careful. So this is something that happens in all other war games, right? It's something that's kind of cool about this system is that, oh look, I have to flip my units over so I know what I've moved. Well, that works just peachy for the first impulse, but after the first impulse, from now on, I have to really be careful and make sure that, you know, I get all my movement done in one place. So like those corrections I made here, I couldn't make those in a later turn because the unit's either going to be on its black side, in which case it can't move, or it's on its white side and there's nothing to differentiate it from other units that moved. I could tilt counters and stuff like that. More like, that's just too much of a pain in the ass. There's already a lot of mechanical crap going on in this game that's getting in my way. And I'm just looking at it as, okay, you know, for the most part, for the NATO side, I think it's pretty easy because they're just going to react. Like if I look and I find a unit that is on its white side and is in an untenable position, we start looking and say, okay, where do we fall back to? For the Soviets, it's much harder, but you know, I'm concentrating and pushing forces forward. One thing I have to worry about is how much do I do mop up in this game? How much am I worried about it? Not much if it's just a couple of units back there. Yeah, they can fuck around with my artillery or something like that conceivably, but for the most part, those units, like something like this that's back there, it may be worth making an attack just to wipe it out. But I think for the most part, it's not, because the real advantage comes down to, oh, that's not him. The real advantage comes down to, look, they're not going to be able to cut my supply with just a couple of units. It's not like OCS where like raiders deep in your territory can cause you problems. So do I want to eliminate them? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. You know, it's really an iffy thing. It depends on how much effort I have to put towards it. My goal is gaining territory and taking important city locations, and that is really it. I'm not that worried about if I strand some unit behind my lines. It's not going to be in good supply either. You know? Let's put a thought to the consolidated victory conditions. First of all, the Soviets is ruled by 22.7 of Bayor rules. Don't worry about that. But for NATO, on the Fifth Corps map, it's how many city hexes they're able to still control. Same thing with Hof Gap map. But there's a lot less on the Hof Gap map. It's a lot less citified, a lot less urban, I guess is the better way to call it. For Bayor, we also have these rules, which is here. Now, here's our points for that, which is somewhere between the Fifth Corps and the Hof Gap map. And that makes sense. There's more city, it's based on the amount of cities that there really actually are on the hexes, or on the maps. However, over here, if we go out to 10 turns, we're looking at, for a strategic victory, we have to make, for the Soviets, they have to clear the map. Like, they have to make it to the edge of the map or exit units. If we're looking a little less, it's still pretty damn close to the whole map, right? Substantial, yeah, you know. But our forward pushes on each of these maps are pretty well defined as to how far we want them to be. How do you compare the two victories? I don't know. The game doesn't actually give you anything for that as far as I recall. reinforcements affect the Soviet victory points. It's just, it's kind of a mess. But then the drop is worth 6 there. There's all kind of complexity here. I don't think there is over here on this one. It says it's determined according to 22.7, the same chart for victory purposes. They must try to line of supply. The edge of the map sheet which they occupy, regardless of the fact they may be able to be supplied by tracing a route onto another map. And this is, I think, the doctrinal victory conditions. Maybe not. There's no real way to compare them. Like, if NATO holds most of a map and all of the cities, for example, if Frankfurt is ignored, NATO will declare a victory, and Warsaw Pact may have made it off up there and also get a victory, a major victory. What does that all mean? I don't know. What's worse, there's no victory conditions for these maps. They're completely left out. I could try to look at the victory conditions for the particular games that they come from and try to patch them in, but I'm going to try to use the same kind of feel. So like losing Hamburg is a big deal. The Germans do not want to lose Hamburg. And they certainly don't want to lose the cities up there. But beyond that, I don't know. Now, it's kind of weird because on the 5th Corps and Hof Gap maps, not the Hof Gap, on the 5th Corps map, there are victory point hexes in the game, which it was the first of the series, and it came out with just, you win by getting these victory point hexes. I have no fucking clue what these work on. They have some things on them, like these little dashed lines, like Münster Süd. Who cares about this? Münster Nord. Are those just political divisions? Do they matter? It's not like there's a map key. What the fuck's this? These might be setup instructions? I don't know. They don't seem to have any impact. I could look them up if I get curious enough, but I'm not that curious. Anyway. Now we push on with the Soviet attacks. And the question here comes to, how much do I want to push the Warsaw Pact units to go further? Making more attacks is going to be really painful. Just charging forward and taking advantage of gaps might be very valuable, but I got to make sure that I have, that I don't end up getting pocketed by pushing too far ahead. Right? Like, if I take advantage of a gap, I've got to make sure that I've got enough there that NATO's not going to be able to get its surround advantage and all that. Anyway. I'm debating whether or not I load this up with just, it's much shorter than the others. I did very little on it in terms of in-game. I think I keep playing and I show you more. Anyway, I don't know what I'm doing. More thoughts I have here. So like the West German territorial units I'm thinking of here. Okay, there's a fistful of these. There aren't a hell of a lot of them originally, but I have a whole bunch. And if I were playing with these, optional rule completely, there's nothing about that that changes the victory conditions. Yet, they would be a major factor, right? I mean, we saw what an armored cav unit could do. Now we've got not quite an armored cav unit, not as good because it's going to be a soft target, but it's going to start in a city in every single case. And each one of these, and I don't know how many I got here. I got that many of them. Each one of them is going to make, is going to be a hard point that's going to be a pain in the ass to take out. And it's going to make it a lot more difficult. If you add an optional rule like this and don't impact the victory conditions, what the fuck? Now, you could combine it. What else do we have? Well, we have the West German doctrine, which we are playing with, and Polish unreliability, which we are playing with. I feel like those kind of counteract each other. That's fair. This is one of the things you can do. You can kind of counteract stuff. Half-gap terrain is an optional rule. I didn't pay attention to that. But, you know, to take out these, I almost feel like the only comparison is to allow the Soviets to use nukes right off the bat. And I just don't buy that that would happen. I just don't accept that. And I also don't want the hassle of writing down where units are hidden and then having to deploy them as secret surprise units. And that can actually strengthen them a little bit. And then, you know, I certainly see so little value to like, well, let's play this game except let's do it after a massive Soviet tactical nuclear strike to open things up, which again does not impact the victory conditions. It's just like, yeah, okay, you know. To a large extent, what I feel like is that the initial games were built to be competitive. Maybe the initial extension was built, although, you know, with the victory conditions where both people have their own victory conditions, and what the fuck do you do when, you know, both sides have won? Both sides declare victory. It happens. I really feel like it's more of just a sandbox to see what the fuck happens. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay. But I do tend to play my war games trying to reach the victory conditions, trying to pay some attention to them. But I feel like kind of like in Europa Universalis, the original, not the EU pop, that, you know, I just got to do my best and aim towards victory conditions, but not be dominated by considerations of them. And in some cases, they may just, you know, not really impact stuff. So, you know, the West German territorials probably are accurate in terms of like what you would actually see. They existed. Question is, would they have any effect? Yeah, I don't know. I feel like they're going to have too much of an effect. The nukes, I just don't buy that the Soviets would use that as a first strike doctrine on an invasion. But I guess it depends on the world situation, you know. It's possible that this attack is done because of something like, you know, a Star Wars deployment being done or whatever that was believably threatening to the whole strategic nuclear position, in which case, yeah, strategic strike is a bit much, but it might be so important, and the Soviets might see that they're, you know, that the fact that there's an armored cavalry covering force that will stop them dead in their tracks, that they absolutely have to use the nukes to try to blast through things. And I mean, did it stop them in their tracks? No. You know, they're making advances. I'm just incredibly worried if that stuff was that effective, how am I going to get through real units? Well, lucky for me, in a lot of places there are some big gaps that don't have real units, and that's what I'm going to exploit. It's a pretty day. I should be out getting my groceries, but anyway, I'm watching videos and thinking about, wow, I kind of enjoyed what I was doing with the withdrawal, right? How much I enjoy sort of falling back and taking defensive positions and whatnot, and maybe taking an attack of opportunity or whatever, and how little I enjoy launching a widespread attack in games. I know most people really would prefer to be on the offensive or whatever, and there's something to be said for it, but I very much more like the lack of effort involved in just trying to find my defensive line and trying to point it out. And sure, I have defense. I'm not necessarily good at defense, but I do take a little bit more pleasure in it. It's just easier. I was considering just moving on and starting to do more fights right after I before I started the long monologue on this video. But now I realize I'm dreading this all these different actions that require die rolls and combats and all the planning and everything that goes into the attack side. I'm so much less into that. I almost invariably prefer the thinking involved in falling back and defending and trying to keep my lines solid and whatnot. Maybe not so much in the tactical, in gunpowder era, never modern, never 20th century, okay? But yeah, there's something I enjoy about moving a force of units and putting pressure with it in those firepower tables and whatnot. So it's not like, it's just I dread it when it comes down to factor calculation, odds, walking back and forth to put things in place. It just, my thinking just doesn't work that way. Okay, well, as I so often like to say, the game ain't gonna play itself, and Soviets aren't gonna attack by themselves. Let's start over here on the North German plain. Take a look at what we're gonna do. I've got a situation here where I might want to do a multi-hex combat. These guys, even with an engineer across the river, I probably don't want to throw them in. They're going to give support in terms of like projecting a zone of control. But the question is, do I want to throw both of these stacks in, or is this stack enough by itself? It says a strength of 12, doubled artillery brings it to 22 if I do a mobile attack, which is what I want to do because this only has a strength of 2. And it's a completely worn out unit. I think I want to just attack with just this unit. So 22 to 2 gives me an 11 to 1. There's no artillery. There's nothing I want to throw in there. So we're going to just handle it as a normal combat. If I get to one where I do use a set piece battle or a multi-hex battle, really, I'll declare it. The big effect here, though, is it costs me an extra movement point to enter every hex. So I'm not going to be able to do broad breakthroughs, at the speed that I was able to move my initial movements. Basically, I have about half the movement allowance, but where there's a gap, it might be worth it. So that's the kind of call I'm going to be making. 11 to 1 in the city is still not a guarantee. If I do a prepared attack, it's pretty close to guaranteed. But instead, I'm going to expend yet another friction point. I spent the 4th one here to release chemicals into the hex. I'm not spending anything off of this. These guys, this stack is each expending 1 friction point to do operations this turn. And then that'll free all these up, and I can move them or not. Because it's not absolutely clear to me that there's anything I want to exploit here. I can gain ground, but I'll gain it more slowly than I would gain it if I wait until my next turn. That's the kind of contemplation I have. Should I even fucking attack this? There's sort of a why bother? Why bother? Because if I'm not going to move these, I don't really need to. By the way, this is brilliant. Moving this thing around. This has really aided me. I have a place to roll the dice, keep my charts that I absolutely need, and get them where I am. So yeah, I think I'm just going to pass, and I'm going to pass here because I don't see exploiting in this direction. So let's look at the next place. Here, I don't have a great exploitation here either. I've been dampened down, but I may have something here. So let's grab one of our tweezers and see if we can handle these reasonably. What are we looking at? We're looking at maybe 36. I don't think it's worth attacking. I've got the set piece battle. I just don't think it's worth it. So I keep looking. Do I want to press forward anywhere here? Again, I don't really see too much advantage to pushing forward. Now, I might want to drop my airborne units, but what kind of disruption are they going to cause me? Not much. Nothing, you know, look, I could screw around with this or something, but I just don't see it. So I'm going to pass on this map. This is something, well, no, I didn't move this guy, so I can't move him. This is something that I just kind of feel is do I really want to spend operations points to push my units harder, or do I really want to spend friction points to push my units harder when they can operate better in other situations? And here, I'm not seeing any immediate advantage. I'll go to the next map and look at that. But I may well be passing. I doubt entirely, because, I don't know, it looks like there's an opening here. Can I take advantage of it? I don't know. Because this goes to, this is a road, so I believe that means it hits the 1.5. An Autobahn is a half plus a half. But a road, C15, C5.12. The unit on its FP must spend 1 additional operation point for every hex it's moved. Exception, a unit on its FP side expends an extra half on an Autobahn. So the Autobahn hexes still cost double, but the road hexes cost 3 times as much. So, yeah, not a good option. All right, we'll think here, and I may just come back and say, you know what? Chicken butt. I just didn't see pushing my units any harder. They're going to be in worse shape, and let NATO respond if they want to push their units. What they can't do is they can't move these guys, but that paralysis is, I think, just turn 1. Looking around trying to find what rules. It's going to be this rule set. There's so many different things. I think it's just turn 1. Yeah. Which means there's some potential. If things were really open, I would push forward, but I'm just not seeing the kind of opening that I want to, you know, let's say I move these guys. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to push with 1 extra FP. With another one, I might be able to force my way forward, but I'm just not seeing it. It's so hard for me to trade damage for space. Indeed, looking the whole map over, I just don't think I'm gonna do it. Now, are there any places, I mean, I'm in a position where I could fight right away, or I'm in a position where I could gain some ground. You know, there's a gap here, but what do I gain? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I could get up to there for a friction point. Does that give me anything, though? Does it really? I don't feel like I'm in a position to cross, you know, the Regnitz at that point. It's going to cost me a couple more friction points, and I'll have really wrecked units if I do push that hard. This is one of the biggest openings I have. Do I have any others that are anything like it? Not here. Here, I'm relatively well contained. This is definitely open. This is open, but again, 3, 6, 9, 12. I could make it to there. But if I wait, next turn, I can make it up into there and be less damaged and have recovered my units, right? Here, I'm facing the enemy just about everywhere. I have nothing open. I'm going to wait. I am going to wait. Now I consider whether NATO waits. Does NATO have anything they absolutely want to do? And remember, I'm still paralyzed, which means I can only move the units, well, first of all, I can only move the units on their white side. There might be some I want to get away, things like this that are really questionable. And rolling a die and getting them, into a position like here might be of some value to me. So for the most part, NATO made choices to withdraw in a couple of little locations. One was here. This one, I don't know if I rolled for. I may have rolled and failed. It may have just been too battered a unit. I'm not going to check one way or another. Over here, I decided these guys are fine where they are. They're actually kind of holding the line better than they would more damaged in better terrain and maybe not moving at all. They only have, 50-50 chance. If I can recall, what is that? It's not here. In one of my rule books, this one, one of the optional rules has the movement. I can't find it now. There's one that has movement, exiting enemy controlled hexes. One is subtracted from the die roll during a PM night turn or during ground fog, or if the unit is separated from all enemy zone of control by a river. One is added for each adjacent hex in addition. Yeah, I kind of like that. I haven't been playing with it, but I think I will try. It probably worked out about even. And over here, I think I pulled this guy back, and that's really about it. Soviets are going to pass again. I think NATO's going to pass. That puts me to the sequence of play. Let's see what we got. We got through the player phases. That's it. We'll be hitting the game turn preparation for turn 2. We'll be getting new points here. New reinforcements, etc. are available. And you can see, and this is the feeling I had every other time I played, I don't really use the friction point system to push my units harder. Am I making a big mistake? Quite possibly. Quite possibly. The goal of the game is territory. Trading hit points for territory might be worth it. Maybe especially on a map where I have a lot of reinforcements coming on and I can push harder. But I just don't see the payoff, man. I just don't see it. I'm not destined for blitzkrieging. All right, so this is the end of turn 1. And I will, continue to play this in a slogging sort of fashion rather than the kind of quick thrusts that the system seems to promise but doesn't let me take advantage of. Psychologically, I'm just not able to do it. I may be right in not doing it. We'll load this up.